I am here only because I represent a belief. The belief that stories can transform the way that we see the world. Standing with thousands of librarians, warriors across this country who, despite bomb threats and threats of jail time, who despite those things are fighting to ensure that these words that stand as a vision of the American Library Association will always ring true. Free people read freely.
In January of 2020, mere months before the arrival of a once-in-a-generation pandemic that would change our lives forever, the American Library Association, ALA, announced the appointment of Tracie D. Hall as its executive director, making Hall the very first female African-American to lead the organization since its founding in 1876. Prior to her now completed tenure at ALA, Hall completed successful stints at the Seattle Public Library, the Haven Free Library, Queens Public Library, and the Hartford Free Public Library. Also part and parcel of her impressive resume is a stint with the Joyce Foundation, where she directed the organization's culture portfolio, developing new grant programs designed to catalyze and scale neighborhood-based arts venues, cultural programming, and creative entrepreneurship. And just last year, Time magazine included her name on its 2023 Time 100, the magazine's annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world. Tracie's life work teaches each of us that the love of libraries and books can free us from hatred and lies, not just for the present generation, but for the liberation of all to come. Joining me in the arena right now, the protector of free people's right to read freely, the exquisite, the powerful, and power-filled Tracie D. Hall. Sister friend, welcome to the arena.
Darius, I could not love you anymore. Thank you for a generous introduction.
It's all based on facts. Let me just take a minute, and our viewers can take it with me. I just want to take this in. In my lifetime, having laid eyes on you person to person, this is just the second time. And we have had conversations. You have done your work since. You've continued. You've since left ALA and continued on, did not miss a beat, continuing to do what you are, that clearly you have no choice but to do. There is a passion deep inside. But I want to take this moment as a selfish moment for me, to just take you in and take this moment in. Okay, I'm good. Let's begin at the beginning, shall we?
Yes.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Los Angeles and raised in the Watts section of Los Angeles after the riots, after the uprising there. So that, you know, has a lot to do with who I am and how I am.
My goodness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I lived, you know, pretty much all over South Central Los Angeles. I lived in Compton, Linwood, went to Linwood High School, and you know, and still home is Watts. That's where, when I say I'm going home, that's where I go. That's it. That's right.
Tell me about the man and woman who created this magic here.
Oh, wow. Well, you know, that touches me because I just lost my father a few months ago, and George Hall, and my mother, Betty Hall. They weren't married, you know, for a long time, but, you know, they created me, and I'm really grateful to both of them. My mom was just an extremely inquisitive person with really an artistic leaning. She loved and enjoyed the arts, as did most of my family. She was a really wise and smart woman. I always say that my mom was one of the smartest people I ever met. You know, my dad also loved the arts. You know, he acted. He was a small business owner. He's one of the reasons why I really think about arts-based community development, because my dad was someone who was really engaged in the arts. And up until the time that he passed away, he was also interested in food justice. He donated, you know, from from his own pocket to ensure he had a park that he would go to, and he would ensure that people who were unhoused or people who didn't have enough food, he would do these food giveaways every Monday. And even, after he had his stroke, that would later prove fatal. I remember coming into his hospital room and, just the first time I saw him after the stroke, and he has his phone in his hand, and he's trying so hard to get his hand to work so that he could, dial someone. And I said, Dad, who are you trying to call? And he said, someone needs to do this food giveaway. Just up until, he passed away. So, those were my parents, and they really influenced me in many ways.
We see it.
Yeah.
You really are their walking, talking, freedom-fighting legacy, aren't you?
Oh, I hope so.
You are. I saw a photo of your father you shared on social media, and I saw you, and I saw you in him. You are their legacy. They're here. I get to meet them through you, and it's so amazing. Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I do. Okay. I do.
Walk me through a few things. Walk me through them, where you are in the ranking order, and then as you share that experience, tell me how it is different and or similar to growing up versus now as all adults.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's interesting because I am the youngest, and between my mom and dad, the youngest of four. Okay. I have three brothers. One passed away early before I was born. He was actually killed during the Watts riots, right? Yes. And then I have my brother Scott, who I'm really close to, and we grew up together. And then I have a brother Jay through my dad, who is just like my dad. He's the epitome of my dad. So I definitely feel like I grew up as the only child. And sometimes when you have that space, Darius, between siblings, you can also feel like the only child too. Because my brother that I grew up in the household with is 7 years older than me. Amazing. He was kind of like a lot of young men are when my mother and father were divorced. So my brother was kind of like brother dad. And I definitely give him credit for that because sometimes I don't know that we understand the weight that we put on young men or young women when they have to also kind of like do a lot of childcare. True. And my brother did that, and I think he still does that to this day. Sure. He's wise. He's one of my best friends. Yes. Okay, good. Yes. It's hard to. I have to. Okay. Because he gives me grace.
Yes, good. Okay. Come on.
Yeah, I love him so much. I love. I'm just so lucky to have been raised with really wonderful men. My grandfather as well, who was such a tender man, even though, he was like hardcore. My grandfather taught me tenderness, and Jack, and my grandmother, of course, Bessie, who, I grew
Jack
up.
And Bessie.
Come on now.
Come on.
Now you already know.
I do.
Come
I'm
on, Louisiana.
I'm
you got those names, right?
I'm sitting at the table.
Right, definitely. And both of them, as brilliant as they were, both of them never achieved a high level of schooling or even of basic reading literacy. And it was my grandmother who took me to libraries because of that. I think, that was her reparations. And so I think of them all the time because they didn't let that hold them back. But when I think about how I navigate the world as someone, with higher education and all of that, I imagine how did they do all of the things that they accomplished?
The resiliency in spite of it all.
In spite of it all.
In spite of it.
Yeah.
My God. Speaking of education, where did you go to high school?
I went to Linwood High School.
Look how you just, okay, come on, Rick.
That's right. Come on, Suge Knight.
Come on, yes, all right.
And other people like that.
Sure,
I mean, I grew up in, I grew up in the height of like hip hop,
You and I are the same age.
I know.
Yeah. So as you were talking, the family history, the history, all of it's lining up. But continue. Linwood, height of hip hop. When hip hop, no judgment, was good. But go on.
It's still, we still got some stuff going on in hip hop.
Yeah.
No, but I grew up, and I say that because it really. I think that sometimes people think that hip hop and that mentality of making something out of nothing, or Oludara, who is Nas's dad, talks about, the broken-hearted, blues that is inherent in hip hop. I think all the time that, that is those of us who are, in our age group, especially Generation X, who might be working, who might be professionals, we still have that. I'm gonna make something out of
It's
this.
at the core,
right?
It's in the DNA now.
Come on
it's
now.
In there, yes.
So I grew up.
We work around challenges. We don't stop at them, baby.
Well, I wish you
that's
would.
the start of the day.
That's it.
Isn't that cute?
Yes. That's and I believe that is our inheritance. Even though we're a smaller generation and sometimes unseen, sometimes the shadow generation, sandwiched between two really big generations, I think there is a grow your own DIY mentality.
It is.
But I remember growing up in high school, NWA, before they were famous, they were selling those mixtapes.
Oh my gosh, you were
the
there.
Compton Swap Meet
Yes,
was
at the
just 2
beginning.
blocks
Oh my gosh.
from Linwood High School, which was on, Bullis Road for anybody who might know South LA. But in any case, I would be buying their mixtapes, never had $3. So they would sometimes give it to me for $1. I'd pay it on layaway.
Come on.
Layaway, as we would call it. And but I remember growing up with people who were, after something. They wanted to make their stories known, and that's what I still hear in hip hop, which maybe gives me. Also, I just love young people too, and that's always been, of interest to me. But I think I still stick with hip hop because I want to hear the stories of young people of every generation,
My goodness. Where'd you go to college?
Oh, I went to UC Santa Barbara undergraduate, which if you read Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis, in the 1993 iteration of that book, the original, she acknowledges UC Santa Barbara. She calls it one of her intellectual homes. And so I was lucky to go to school with people like Douglas Daniels and Claudine Michel and Gerald Horne and the great Cedric Robinson as professors. That's where I met Gwendolyn Brooks. She was a really great friend of Daryl Dance. Come on now. Yes, our Gwendolyn Brooks, I met her on the campus. I carried her books to another class. I met James Baldwin, who was lecturing.
In your lifetime?
Yes, I met James Baldwin and he kissed me on my forehead. Yes. I met and drove around in my little Toyota Corolla for 3 days, Toni Morrison, who was visiting. Come on now.
You have no choice.
Come on, you see Santa Barbara too.
I tell people by the time we get to the 5th question, I don't care if you are president of the United States or the former head of the ALA, you will see patterns if you ask those first questions. It's from the root, you see what drives the passion, but continue talking.
No, because you're right, you see patterns and you also see that we're all standing on the shoulders of people, because how Toni Morrison came to ride in my Toyota was some of our professors. I was trying to write fiction, trying to write poetry, and she was coming to visit the campus, and they said, Ms. Morrison is going to need somebody who's going to be able to get her from, here to there, and we said it would be you, and we've talked to your professors, and you can get the time off going to class, and that's what I did. And can you imagine?
No, I'm trying to as you speak. My God, just the history in your body.
The investment, though. Come on now. Now I'm someone who's showing up. I had the big dookie braids, as we called them then. I had the big bamboo earrings. I had the tight, black skirt, the little.
Oh my God, you
kitten
are
heel
my
booties.
generation.
Yeah, the slouchy.
Yes.
But they saw through all of that.
Yeah.
I was wearing a red lipstick. It was outlined with black. Come on, Darius.
You hitting something for me.
Come on.
And this is why, and we just gonna go all over the place. This is why a few through lines for me. We're going to talk about the caste system later, but I had this conversation with Kim Fox on this very set. This is one of the things that I respect about you above and beyond your talent, your passion. You refuse to allow yourself to be made the Oprah Winfrey outlier. Because let me tell you, this is just my opinion, Chicago and beyond, the caste system is designed. They fight us, but when a you or I get through, then they say, we accept you, quotes around it. And in return, you will deny your history, because by doing so, you quietly burn the bridge that connects you to the next yous. Yeah. And then when we're done with you, we quietly push you out. And because we've isolated you for so long, there won't be any support for you. And then we'll just continue the pattern. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So when you walk through the earth and when you first stepped on this set and I saw a regal, proud black woman who was doing things in what others like to think of rarefied air, but I go, why is that not possible for us? And she does it it's not unique, it's not special. She comes from this incredible line of folks, degree or non-degree, because we always try to do these things both in our house and out to separate us. Well, if you have this, no, my mama is. Miss Gloria Madeline Joshua Hillman is one of the smartest people in the world.
Come on.
And if there's a street fight and she's 80, I'm standing next to her, because you will let the smooth taste fool you. And you will she will pull that, whatever hair she's doing that day.
Right.
She will pull it back and she will go old school. And then with the smoothness of any CEO, switch right back.
Come on.
So when you talk, I just wanted to mark that. That is one of the things, and it just hit me where I can articulate it in this moment, that draws me to you in addition to all the rest. I have a question. I think I know the answer. Were you a good student?
Oh, yeah.
Why? What made you a good student?
Because I wanted to learn.
Okay, the efficiency of your answers is delicious. Okay, you said next. Okay.
Listen,
okay.
right?
That's half of it, and half of it is you just hit something else. When there is we have to do so much, black and brown people, on imagination with no representation, no exposure, no having seen it before. So sometimes, I remember when I graduated high school a year early, I started reading books because I had a lisp and stutter growing up. And my fourth grade teacher came to my mom when they do the tests, the fourth and seventh grade, they saw I had an aptitude. That's when I started keeping a journal. And that's when I started, which is why another thing that draws me to you. The power of books, generally, but the power of books for under-resourced, underserved, systemically, historically, intentionally, othered people. That is what I would read while my delicious and beautiful, too beautiful for their own good, siblings who are gregarious are running around. Me and my little asthmatic self would read the books and see worlds and have empathy for people who didn't look like me necessarily, because they weren't in my face. I had the safety of trying them on. I had the safety. So when you talk to me, you talk so visually, but the power of the work you're doing right now to insist that free people continue to read freely. It's more than just about reading. It's the reason that this little gay black kid from the east side of Detroit, first in his family to go to college, can sit here right now. You can't tell me it's not a luxury item. Okay, go on. Thoughts?
Oh, wow. First of all, you're so beautiful. I think about everything that you said, and I just can't stop looking at you. I mean, I think there's a lot of resilience, there's a lot, of unspoken, to kind of get to some of the places, the way that I've had to navigate it, being,
Your very presence,
and
baby,
and fat little black girl, growing up and all of that, and it connects me to anybody who's been invisibilized. It connects me, to the little white and black girls who don't look like Barbie and Ken, whose stories are never told. It connects me to the Latino and Asian immigrants that I grew up with, who often had to be a good student, but also had to help their parents navigate running businesses and taxes and understanding bills. It
and send some of the loan money back from college.
Come on.
Sent it back to make sure that it was paid for.
Come on. It connects me. I mean, we have all of these stories, and I think that's the reason why, I do feel compelled to fight for the right to read, because in some of those books are those stories, and until you see those stories, you don't believe that you're legitimate. You really don't believe that you're legitimate. You have to have somebody say, you are worthy, and your story is not an aberration. Your story is a story that's called by other people. And so, what, for me, it is about showing up and being real and being being tangible, and counting and taking up space and telling your story and using your voice and saying, I'm not a lie and I'm not someone's imagination. I exist, and that's what reading does. And when I read Heidi, growing up, I'd never been to the Swiss Alps. I wanted ghosts, I've never had them. But Heidi had a grandfather who was tender and gruff. And in that book, I learned how to love my grandfather, who had been through so much by the time that I was born. He was kind of a stoic, silent man. But the way that he would pet the dog, or the way that when my mom was hospitalized and my grandmother, wasn't somebody who was all about hair and all of that. And I went to school and the kids made fun, of this thick, wild hair. And I came home and I told my granddaddy, I need somebody to do my hair. And my grandfather took me in the kitchen and he heated up some probably old pressing combs that hadn't been used since my mom and aunt were young. And he took his really calloused hands and he tried to do something with my hair, and I could go to school next day. Talk about tenderness. Talk about those stories. And so for me, I fight for I fight for libraries and for the right to read, because people who can't afford books otherwise need a place. But we all deserve to see ourselves in stories. We all deserve to tell our stories. Yeah,
that's a birthright. Do you remember a time, for me anyway, I'll tell you about my experience, tell me how it resonates. I always used to say, as soon as I get a seat at the table, I'm going to do it different. I'm going to make room for others. I'm going to stand for something. I'm going to remember what I feel right now, being told, you're too this, you're too that, you're too young, you're not ready, wait your turn, do this, be seen and not heard, all those things. And I said to myself, when, because I'm going to. Because the best way to get me to win is to tell me I can't. Choosing to underestimate me, that's a fun day. That's
we share that.
I know we do. But then it hit me, and I'm well past it now for anybody who's unsure. We're the adults in the room now. Yeah. If not us, who? If not now, when?
Right.
And so resisting the urge, because I have a friend who's an actress in New York, and we used to talk about this when we were at the University of Michigan. They didn't let us in, we created our own. We had a show called Blues and Jazz in the Basement. I actually sang. And all the folks who wouldn't let us into the musical theater and all that stuff, literally at University of Michigan in the old Freeze building, there was this space in the basement. And we had Blues and Jazz in the Basement. Everybody wanted a ticket to that. Couldn't get in. That was standing room only. And then it hit us as she went to her way and I went mine. The very power, the very fearlessness that got us in, then once we got a few little prizes and gifts, our fear aversion increased. Yeah. And if we weren't careful, we were going to become another cog that was pulled in and controlled through money and a few trinkets. And we had to hold each other accountable to fight back to fearlessness. Yeah. And I watched you do that. Did you ever have a moment in your career, because you are a star? Good, you just received it. I love that for you. You are a star. You know this. There is power when you walk in the room. I have watched it, and I've been in rooms that you weren't in where it's been discussed. You are both respected, and something about you make them nervous as hell. Stop me if I'm wrong. And I've been in the rooms where people marvel at it, and I can see it, the observer in me. I'm like, you don't know what to do with it. You are both drawn to and repulsed by it. You are both all at once. But was there ever a point in the woman sitting here before me right now, powerful and power-filled, where you had to fight the urge not to drink the Kool-Aid?
Wow, that's a really good question. Well, I'm not interested in Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
Sorry, Mike.
When I was little, I drank it and all of that. So it's nothing against Kool-Aid. But, I mean, in terms of the metaphor, like, that's not why I'm in the room. I didn't come in the room for the Kool-Aid. I came into the room.
And you were always sure and stood firmly in that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I don't know, I can't see myself the way that others do. But what I know that I'm sure about is what I am here to accomplish. It has not been accomplished yet, because I am very much driven by spirit. I mean, I remember when I was little, there was a commercial. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. Coca-Cola, I think it was. And I would ask my mom, how do I get there? Because I knew early on that when it came to even playing jump rope, that my goal was not to just be the best jumper. That is so fun, especially when you're playing double dutch. Yeah. Jumping it's like sublime. But I wanted to turn the rope so that people wouldn't get out, because I wanted people to have that feeling as long as they could, that feeling of ecstasy, that feeling of, it's a transcendent feeling when you're in the flow. And so, it doesn't matter to me who's in the room, and it doesn't matter to me who's on the table. If I'm supposed to be in that room, I'm going to be in that room, and everything I touch, I will change just by my presence. That's Octavia Butler, right? And so I feel that same way about you. You're on purpose. You are here to change things. And so we can't be dazzled by accomplishments or what people say. That is neither here nor there. I just want to be in the flow. And I know that my way will be made. And I hope that's okay to say in a space like this, but that's what motivates me. Right now, I'm really interested in in the timidity that has been baked into what's happening in terms of our socioeconomic and our sociopolitic in this country and others, where people who know what's right feel real fear about standing up for it or about naming it. And I'm not afraid. We have to make the connections, and we have to fight for what's right, because if we don't, there's too much to lose. So I'm not interested in the Kool-Aid. I'm interested in justice. I'm not interested in the Kool-Aid and who made it and who drank it. I'm interested in equity. I'm interested in peace. I'm interested in us calling out and saying that war is wrong and that death is not the point of history. That's what I'm really interested in. And so whatever has happened in the past is in the past, but I'm moving forward because there's something, and I can't even name it, but there's something that I have to do. And I'm just getting ready for it. I'm just getting prepared.
And until you do it, you're not stopping.
Oh, no.
That's it. And you'll know it when you do it.
Spirit knows.
Amen today. Amen. Listen, let me luxuriate in this. Tell me about your first paid job.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, my first paid job was at a fast food restaurant.
Come on, tell me about it.
And I have to tell you, that's where I could see who could eat and who couldn't. And and I hope this is not wrong to say, but I want to be honest.
Please.
Sometimes, it would be that card is just making it through the drive-through, and it would be like a mom in there or a dad in there with a whole bunch of kids. And they would get something extra that day, or a whole bunch of extra. Because I really got a chance to see a lot of real poverty. And I have to tell you how I see the world. I was just in Maine speaking at a library association. And what I was really interested in is the amount of roofs that were nearing collapsing, or this is how I read. Because reading is, it isn't just text.
Yes.
We read our worlds, right?
Yes.
So the things that I'm looking at, in working in fast food, is that I'm looking at who can afford, for whom is this like a treat, or for whom is this maybe people don't have stoves at home. Because people say, well, why don't people cook at home? Do you know how much gas costs? Do you know how many people don't have and can't pay their utility bills? See, that's how I read the world.
Do you know the embedded privilege of your question?
Come on now, okay? And so it was fast food, and then after that, After working in fast food, I started doing like a lot of work, working in social services. My first job after college was directing a homeless shelter for unhoused youth, and young people who were gang involved or involved in in the sex trade, and so that also showed me like other realities. So librarianship came because I was really interested in literacy and the right to read as a tool for people who have been marginalized.
Thank you for that. I want to talk about, fairly briefly, in the big picture of everything I want to talk about today. But I want to talk about your stint with the American Library Association, and I want to do it in this way. Tell me the most thrilling accomplishment part, day, experience, and then the most challenging of your time there.
Yeah. Well, most of it was all thrilling because, when I was there, and this was my second time at ALA, so the first time I was at ALA, I directed what is now the Office for Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services, but then it was just Office for Diversity. And a lot of our work there was making sure that library services equitably reached marginalized communities, and that was amazing. But also making sure that we started to build the core of librarians who look like the rest of the country, right? Because librarianship is overwhelmingly mostly white. Very few people of color, very few people who speak languages other than English. And so, because of the charge of librarianship, which is to collect the intellectual and cultural production, of a people, we need to make sure that we have diversity, or else we don't have a legitimate, library service or librarianship as a career. So that was that. Coming back to the American Library Association as executive director, it was just a chance to really blow a lot of that up, to make sure that the association was solvent financially. You were announced in January 2020. Yep.
You started in February.
Yes.
And then in March, all hell broke loose.
March 10th, yep.
You had been there a matter of weeks on the job.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. But if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
You better get out. Stop pulling my mantras out of my head.
No, but I mean, I know that that's
you got to mean it when you say it.
You got to mean it when you say it. I mean, we know how to deal with lack. We know how to make a way out of no way.
We know how to make $1 out of 15 cents.
Yes,
Mama
absolutely.
Says.
So,
Yes.
everything, because when it's something you love, like American librarianship, something you want to protect, you want to support our communities. For me, it was about just reaching deep within and pulling everything that I had out. And also, you can accomplish anything you want to accomplish with relationships. So it was also about reaching out to people, reaching out to our major publishers, reaching out to our major vendors and saying, we have to make sure that this association remains upright so we can support librarians and the people that libraries serve. So I think some of the things that were most fulfilling, really working to support, because the biggest book ban in this country right now is happening in jails and prisons, in which the people who need information most are restricted, right? And so part of that was really working on support for those communities that are incarcerated, working on support for adults who have limited literacy, making sure that because the majority of HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions and other kinds, are also in internet deserts. Yes. So making sure that we could provide grants so that those institutions could catch up. So every day was really fulfilling. I think the challenging thing for me was also watching our country fall under the spell of McCarthyism 2.0.
Come on.
And one thing that we really have to connect, is that we have a major candidate who was running for president at this time, who was one of his major advisors was also in his youth as a younger man, the advisor to Joseph McCarthy. So we have to connect the dots. That's history.
Yeah.
That's not something I'm
And
making
maybe it's
up
too
or an
obvious
anecdote.
for us to
Right.
Maybe it's too obvious because this, to you and I, this seems obvious.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and the tactics are there in terms of what we can say, what we can read, or being anti-science, anti-data, or sort of like the beginning moments of the contemporary censorship, were starting to be laid in place in 2016 and 2017. And even we see what happened, at the early stages of the pandemic, when even using words like the pandemic
Yes.
or talking
Yes.
about disease mitigation
Yes.
could get you in trouble if you were a
Yes.
public health official.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think part of what's been challenging for me and remains challenging as a leader of any type of institution or as someone who is an advocate for intellectual freedom and the right to read is to watch us move into an era of disinformation that has just become sort of like a blanket, has blanketed the U.S. That's been really, really hard.
Got it. I'm going to adjust gears a bit. Tell me about a mentor or a few mentors. Tell me about what that's meant to you and how that's impacted you, that relationship, mentor, and you as the mentee.
Yeah, so I've had so many mentors. We talked about that. I have benefited from having people just care about me when I don't feel like I even merited it, some of my mentors, Tracie Orange, she was the person who recruited me into librarianship.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tracie,
Miss
yes.
Orange, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, Tracie. She remains a compass for me. Carla Hayden, who is now our Librarian of Congress, but I knew her early on in my career, much earlier, obviously, than when she was in that role. She's someone who has shown me excellence, especially in leadership. Anwar Ahmed, who was a quiet, brilliant community librarian, and he used that term, community librarian. He was someone that told me, your work can't just be in this building, it has to be in the community. You can't be a librarian unless you are in the community. I want to see that you are attending community meetings. I want to know that you know the concerns of your community. People, it's just really hard to name everyone. I've been inspired by so many people, Claudine Michelle and Dr. Daniels, when I was an undergraduate. Claudine gave me back an A- paper and said, you're a better writer than this. You should have an A. And so rewrite this paper and then give me back an A paper. But just those kinds of standards, people didn't give it to me easy, which I'm really grateful for. They said, I see something in you. And so I just, at every stage, and even now, so many of my friends, my mom died when I was about 25. And I always say that me and some of my girlfriends, we raised each other the rest of the way.
Come on.
And, they had those standards for me. My friends had standards for me, their expectations of me. So, I feel like I've had in Chicago, Angel Isagiri and Michelle Boone, if you know, you know, have remained friend-tours. They are friends who are also mentors, have these standards of excellence, are there, in this non-judgmental way, have just been with me through a lot of different twists and turns. So I've been blessed along the way to have mentors and friend-tours who have caught me when I've fallen, and who have these expectations that are unrelenting, and not just that I do things, but that I'm happy, that I'm whole, that I'm healthy, that I am making sure that I'm going after fulfillment, those kinds of things. It's been incredible.
And that just gave me a follow-up question. I had to imagine, and that goes into joy and fulfillment and managing what is a very busy life. I have to imagine that there is a person in every corner who wants you to be their mentor. How do you manage what I'm sure is a deluge of requests? How do you manage it, one, when you have to say no, and two, what must exist in the mentee for you to be prepared to say yes?
That is an amazing question.
You bring the best out of me.
Yeah, that is a great question, because mentorship is a responsibility. And when you have been mentored, whether people called it that or not, you do feel like you need to pass it on, and you must.
You must.
Right? I mean, I think for me, I feel like mentoring happens for me most organically when it doesn't feel like we're setting appointments. When I feel like you also are someone who not only do you want to ask a question, but you actually want the answer, right?
Go on.
Right?
You are talking to the bottom of my spirit. Go on.
Right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it also requires a
Yes.
lot of humility.
Yes.
You know, one of the things
Mentoring,
come on.
if I can, mentoring is, we're not doing this for performative.
Oh.
If you want my time and my input, it's not just to check off the box and go, I list Darius Hillman or Tracie Hall as a mentor.
Right.
That's a waste of all of our time.
Right,
Continue.
and not just for the name. And, you know, let's call it what it is, too. I also think that it is an imperative, especially if you are someone who is coming from any type of community where you yourself are not necessarily supposed to or designed to succeed.
Absolutely.
If you've broken through, as you said earlier, I mean, it is a responsibility. But for me, it is also about humility. For me to be mentored effectively, I've really had to position myself as a learner when it comes to mentors, and just listening, because somebody doesn't just say, I'm about to mentor you right now.
Right.
What they do is drop some knowledge.
What you did on me a few calls ago. Continue.
Right? Right.
But continue. I just want to
Right.
mark it in real time. Yes.
Right. No.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, like so let's talk about, I'm gonna turn it on a table for a minute. Let's talk about you.
I don't want, never mind. Because I know the last time I told you I didn't want to, you didn't care. So
Yeah.
continue. Go on.
Well, I will say this, you know, I think you have greatness in your DNA. So what you touch and the people that are around you are also going to have that kind of energy. And it's going to be really important that, you know, you put yourself around people who don't see that as a threat. You right? I mean, because that's really ultimately what this is all about. I think in mentoring, you want to make sure that you are mentoring someone who, first of all, has that desire to learn, but is also willing to be a learner. And I also think a good mentor understands that they are still learning as well.
Yeah,
it
even
works
within
together.
that relationship.
Yeah, you're
yes,
also learning
yes.
from your mentee, you know.
I have mentees who are now peers. I will call them and we'll laugh about the weirdness of how our relationship evolves and bobs and weaves, and nothing gives me greater joy than that. When I anyway, I'm going to ask you your thoughts on some things.
Okay.
What is your thoughts on the existence of a caste system in the U.S.?
Oh, first of all, it's real.
Okay.
There are people who, you know, are supposed to succeed and people who aren't. I mean, I think also too is very nuanced. And also there's a lot of tokenism in terms of people breaking through and a lot of gatekeeping, you know, around, and it's something that we all sort of participate in, whether directly or indirectly, whether consciously or subconsciously. And I feel like that is holding back progress and productivity, because a caste system to me is really about maintaining also the status quo.
Absolutely.
There's nothing innovative in it, and so I think we have to call it out, you know, when we see it, but not participate in it, right? So not gatekeeping.
We have some unlearning to do within our own house.
A lot of
we are
unlearning.
victims in a lot of ways. An example here, Mom, please don't kill me from Detroit. I remember when Barack Hussein Obama was running for president. And I remember this. I think my late brother was still around. And we were all in my mom's house saying, you've got to vote for him, Mom. And she's like, I'm not. They're going to hurt him. And I remember, I can still remember the room where we were sitting there going, his family's had the conversation. They know what they're doing. But Mom, you can't withhold your vote thinking you're protecting him. And one of the best experiences for me, because we all lived in the same zip code, we all sort of went with her on election day. And I remember it was hours. I took a book. I had a book.
Yes.
And it was beautiful, and there was no complaining. I remember an elder, you know, you're not supposed to help people. An elder needed something, and I went over and they were like, go on. I was like, ma'am, you do this and you do that. And my mom voted. So as for me personally, I said this on an interview once. We had just released our documentary, Working While Black.
Yeah.
And they asked me, and the person you met, Jason here, my producing partner on that, and they said, what do you want white audiences to get from this? And I had to check myself and go, with all respect, that's not my concern here. My concern here, Jason's answered that question and quite well. What I'd like to do is reframe that question to what I want black audiences to get from this. And that is to see it for what it is and to know that a part of our recovery from this is to unlearn. We're gonna have to hold ourselves accountable for unlearning. I'm not looking for, at this point, I'm not looking for anyone outside of my tent to save me. Everyone's welcome under the tent. But I'm not looking, because everybody is going to have to unlearn. This caste system is deeply rooted, it's outlived all of us. But what I am accountable for is through this job even, to support everyone, but you can't be all things to all people. So you have to decide where you're gonna draw your lines, where you're gonna put limited resources, both financial resources, but also emotion and time. So that's kind of my view, but I have to hold myself accountable. Having this job, being at this point, I still have inherent biases. I still have implicit biases. I still have to check my own self, and you did it to me very well on the call a few weeks ago, of just by design and habit lowering myself to be more comfortable. Because what I've come to realize, I don't care what I do, it's never going to make them comfortable. And by them, I mean anyone, whoever that is, somebody who doesn't want you in the room, whether they look like you or don't, it's never going to be enough.
But it's not your responsibility to make them comfortable, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
I think
a hard lesson to
you have a
learn.
really big responsibility because who you put in this chair, that's your legacy, right? And so I think, you can help explode the case system just by that, just by that. So, but I don't think it's and I think frankly, to be really honest, I think sometimes people are they grow the most when they're made uncomfortable, right?
It's
and
the
so,
truth.
yeah.
This should be Tracie, this should be, my God, this is kitchen table conversation at its best. I hope you're getting something out of this, because my God, you're giving me everything. Good.
Absolutely.
This is the time in this dash moment where our democracy is hanging in by a thread, and I truly believe we are at the 50, my life is a series of 50% chances, so I got good odds. But I believe right now, to the core of my being, we are in the dash moment. We got a 50% chance of pushing down our shoulders, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, really pull up the rug, pull up the floorboards, and look at 600 plus years, America's original sin and everything that came before and after it. 50% chance, and all of us has to do it, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and there are going to be moments where you and I love this, I'm going to go, I have to agree, we have to agree to disagree here, let me think about that, and just that becomes kind of our norm. That discomfort. Have I been made uncomfortable today? We've got so much work to do individually and together. We can do that, 50% chance.
Right.
Or the locusts are coming and the rapture has arrived. And all I have control over, to your earlier point, is what I do in the dash moment.
Yep.
Who's in this chair, how I give grace to myself and others, how I hold myself accountable. I don't have control over either of these, but I do have great control of what I do in this dash moment. And either way, a gospel song just popped in my head. I'm gonna be ready.
Yeah.
Because you said stay ready, so you don't have to get ready, so you don't have to stay ready. I have another I want your thoughts on. Black excellence as a resistance strategy.
Oh,
Thoughts?
yeah.
Walk me through.
Yeah, that's sort of my mantra.
I know it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot about, a lot of us are talking about what, just happened to Dr. Gay, the president of Harvard.
Yeah.
And of course, we have.
And the Queen at Lincoln.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, Dr. Bonnie. And, and we know that we're in an era where, especially in terms of education, there's a lot of persecution happening, a lot of persecution of women or, people who might, want to open up, sort of the channels, to the people who are least likely to have access, and certainly Black women, right?
Oh,
and so
gosh. It's not just me, is it? there is a pattern that is measurable, and I'm actually having conversation with folks. I want to talk to you about your help on that. Post George Floyd to now, it is clear. I'm watching it, and if you don't pay attention, it'll slip by you. But something intentional and pattern is going on. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. It's a delegitimization of equity, diversity, and inclusion. As a viable component, of any institution. I mean, people are attacking it, right? And also trying to discredit leaders, organizations that, have moved in the direction of saying we want to pay more than lip service. And we also see at a lot of institutions that even the very sort of officer, the equity, diversity, and inclusion officer, that those names and those semantics are being stripped down. So it's just student excellence or organizational performance or those kinds of things.
Culture.
And I think, yes, absolutely. And I think that we have to be vigilant because, these are rising tides that lift all boats. Like, I'm definitely someone who believes, that we're the measure of all things. And so how I might outpicture, as a Black woman who's had this experience is really a particularity, but it also should connect me to anyone else on the planet. And so what, I want to just take sort of this opportunity to say is that when we begin to deride or to create spaces where equity, diversity, and inclusion, or leaders, like Dr. Gay, where they fail, the institutions regress, right? And even our country. I think Harvard has taken a huge hit,
as they should,
and I think that they need to be wrestling with that for decades to come, because any organization that is not of the people, does not speak to the people, is illegitimate. I will just say that, and I also think that we really need some of the foundations, and I come from, I've been in the foundation world, a few times, really need to audit this moment and look at the leaders who were hired, I think in a lot of ways, to be sometimes a smokescreen.
Absolutely.
A smokescreen.
And we were angry about it the moment they came on board, which is why what I'm watching now with the attempted to be quiet push out and it's so vitriolic because it's breathtaking, it's vitriolic. And you and I talked about it earlier. You bring them in, you try to isolate them. And then in the case of the president of Harvard, it was vitriolic and very public. But we try to isolate, and right now...
And a lot of tactics that, that move from place to place, and that's usually what happens, right? Saying, oh, it was plagiarism. Oh, no, not necessarily plagiarism. It was just poorly cited.
It was plagiarism until my wife is now accused of it.
Right. So we've got, I do think, though, that we need to be rigorous in this.
Absolutely.
I think that we should have an audit, and I believe that foundations that have invested in equity, diversity, and inclusion, especially leadership, should take an audit of the leaders who were in these posts, installed in these posts right after the murder of George Floyd, and to see where they are not even 5 years later, to take the institutions to task. I think that's something that we have to do. We have to, because what is that signaling to young people? What should you aspire to? I mean, what is it worth if it is costing people their careers, their lives, their health, their wellness, those kinds of things. This is one of those critical moments in the evolution of this country and in the evolution of American institutions.
And I think I go back to we are the adults now in the room. I think you and I and others, there's more to talk about, but we'll have those conversations off air and then come back on air and bring the rest of the community in. Tracie Hall, I have to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad our paths have crossed. I'm so grateful that you're in my life. I need it. I spoke to you, the last time we spoke was the day after a board meeting here. And I know I have long since given up the thought that life is luck and happenstance. My life has been a series of miracles in divine order. Everything, even the pain, has been divine. So I that you have come into my life at this moment, and you have held me accountable from the first moment we met. But it's in such a loving way. It's never what you say, it's how you say it, and I can feel it from you. So we got one more segment. It's not completely over yet, but I just wanted to, in case I, for some reason, forgotten the last segment, to thank you from the bottom of my very being for all you've already done for me, but what you do for others. And still, I pray that you make time for yourself, and however I can support that, you know I'm always just a phone call, text, or knock on my door away. Stay with us. We got one more segment, 3 for the Road. You stay with us as well, Chicago. We'll be right back after this with 3 for the Road. Stay with us. Tracie D. Hall, librarian, curator, activist, time most influential. I have a final segment with you. First, thank you for the conversation that preceded this again. I have a final segment. It's called 3 for the Road. I won't waste time giving any warnings or disclaimers because I cannot imagine a question I would throw your way that you are not going to take and run with. Let's begin. You ready?
Yes.
First question. If you could have dinner with any person, living or deceased, who would you choose and why?
Martin Luther King,
Come on.
for sure. One is because, he wasn't even 40 when he passed away. And so the Martin Luther King that we, celebrate and honor wasn't there yet. When he was killed, he was still considered to be sort of a lightning rod. He was, fighting for, poor people. The verdict was still out in some ways, even though he had won the Nobel Prize, about whether or not he was an upstart, or if he was just doing this for himself, or, whether or not he was committed really to being a man of the cloth. He was not the Martin Luther King that we name every building and every street after,
Absolutely.
Today. And so I would want to talk to that Martin to say, you've been stabbed, you've been jailed, you've been ridiculed and ostracized, even by Christians and even by the Black church.
Come on.
How are you finding, what are you pulling from? Because you do not know what is going to happen. That's the Martin that I would want to talk to. Because I think that we forget that it is only 2020 vision now that we use to sort of, to lift him up. I would want to know, what is it like to get up every day and to do this work, even though you're being talked about and ridiculed and persecuted? What are you pulling from? And how are you learning to refine who you are and your own humility? And that's the Martin I would want to talk to.
Great first answer. Second question. Do you have any regrets?
None. Next.
In my core, I knew that was going to be it, and I knew you were going to respond. I knew it. You were going to be like, what's next? Final question. One piece of advice present-day Tracie D. Hall would have given her 21-year-old self.
Just keep going.
My God, today. Tracie D. Hall, I don't have anything to say but thanks. But part of why I'm okay letting you go today, because I think we both know, I think we both feel it in our spirit. You and I are really just getting started on what we're going to be doing together and with support of other folks.
I hope so.
Agree.
This has been amazing. You are amazing.
I'm going to cry. Thank you. You are amazing as well. Thank you for coming. Thank you for all that you do. We've talked about this, reading words on page, but where they took me is the reason I'm sitting here today, to a large degree. And that is one of the gifts my father gave me, was the love of reading. And my teacher helped expand. So thank you Thank you, thank you. We've got more to do, but for today, for what you just poured into me in Chicago in this past hour, and my mommy in Detroit, thank you for that. And thank you, Chicago and beyond, for joining us. Let me leave you with a final thought for the road, courtesy of someone you should know very well by now, American librarian, author, and curator, one Tracie D. Hall. This is the moment in which we have to assert the belief that freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to read, there's a reason they're part of our First Amendment rights. You don't get to personal protections and you don't get to a democracy unless you have the right to read. Until next time, take good care of you and each other. Good night. Thank you so much.
This was delightful. Oh my goodness.